was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. I'd just come back from grocery shopping when I noticed a thick envelope wedged in my mailbox. At first, I thought it was junk mail, but when I tore it open, my heart nearly stopped. Inside was a statement from a luxury event venue in downtown Denver. Total balance due, $10,137. My name was printed across the top as the responsible account holder. I dropped onto the couch, flipping through the paperwork in disbelief. Venue rental, catering deposit, floral arrangements, all charged to my credit. But I hadn't booked a wedding venue. I wasn't even engaged. My hands shook as I dialed my mom. She answered cheerfully, like nothing was wrong. "Mom, why am I getting a bill for $10,000? The pause on the other hand told me everything. Then her voice softened into that sugary tone she always used when she wanted to excuse the inexcusable. "Oh, honey, don't overreact. It's just the deposit for Kendra's engagement party. She needed help booking the venue, and you have such good credit." I felt my blood pressure spike. "You did what?" "Kendra doesn't have the credit history," Mom explained quickly, "and the venue needed a card on file. It's just temporary. We'll pay you back before the bill is due." I could already hear my sister in the background, laughing, probably trying on dresses, while my stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't just irresponsible. This was theft. And when I finally confronted them face to face, things went from bad to worse. Part 2. Family helps family. I stormed into my parents' house that evening, the bill clutched in my hand like evidence in a courtroom. Mom and Dad were at the dining table, sipping coffee, while Kendra scrolled on her phone, looking smug. I slammed the envelope down in front of them. "Explain this." Dad shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my eyes. Mom sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Honey, calm down. It's not a big deal. We already told you, it's just the deposit for Kendra's engagement party." Kendra finally looked up, smirking. "Yeah, Avery, chill. Once Ryan and I get married, we'll have plenty of money. We'll pay you back." My jaw tightened. "You used my credit, without my permission, for $10,000. That's not a favor. That's fraud." Kendra rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic. You make more money than all of us combined. What's the big deal?" "The big deal," I snapped, "is that this is my name on the bill. If you don't pay, my credit gets destroyed." Mom leaned forward, her voice stern now. "Avery, family helps family. You've always been the responsible one. It's just one party. You can afford this." There it was again. That old family script. I sacrifice, Kendra shines. I work, she plays princess. And now, I was supposed to quietly foot a $10,000 bill because she wanted a fancy venue? I shook my head. "No, I'm not paying a dime. You have 30 days to clear this balance, or I freeze the card and report the charge as unauthorized." The room fell silent. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. "You'd really do that? To your own sister?" "Family doesn't steal from each other," I said, grabbing the bill. "If Kendra wants a fairy tale wedding, she can pay for it herself." Kendra's face twisted in anger, but for once I didn't care. I was done being the bank of last resort. Part 3. The Venue Manager's Truth. The following Monday, I marched straight into the luxury event venue with the bill in hand. The manager, a polished woman in a navy blazer, greeted me with a professional smile. "Miss Martin, how can I help you today?" I placed the paperwork on her desk. "This bill has my name on it, but I never signed a contract with you. Someone used my credit without my permission." She raised an eyebrow and pulled out a folder. "We have the signed contract right here." My stomach dropped as she slid the papers across the desk. There it was, my name, my address, even my credit information. And a signature at the bottom that looked almost like mine. Almost. But the curve of the last letter was wrong. "That's not my signature," I said firmly. The manager studied it again, her smile fading. "Are you saying this was forged?" Yes, I was never here. I never authorized this, she sighed, leaning back in her chair. Miss Martin, this is a serious matter. If the charges aren't paid, it will be sent to collections under your name. But if you can provide proof the signature was forged, we can open a fraud investigation. My chest tightened. Proof. Of course. My family had stolen not just my credit, but my identity. As I left the office, my phone buzzed. A group text from Mom. We heard you went to the venue. Why are you making this harder than it needs to be? Just let us handle it. Seconds later, Kendra chimed in. Seriously, Avery, stop embarrassing us. You can afford it. Just pay the bill. I stopped, in the middle of the sidewalk, staring at the screen. Embarrassing them? I was the victim here, and somehow they were twisting it into being my fault. No, not this time. I typed back one line. 30 days. Or I report everything as fraud. Part 4. Guilt trips and gaslighting. The calls started that same evening. First Aunt Patricia, then Uncle Ray, then even Grandma. Each one said the same thing in slightly different words. Avery, it's just money. Don't ruin your sisters. Big day over a little bill. Sweetheart, you've always been the strong one. Kendra needs this chance. Family helps family. Can't you just let this go? Every word was another knife twisting in my chest. They didn't care that my signature had been forged, that my credit was on the line, that $10,000 wasn't just money. They only cared about protecting Kendra's fairy tale. Meanwhile, Kendra was posting selfies at cake tastings and bridal boutiques, bragging online about the dream venue she had scored. Not a single mention of who was footing the bill. Me. At work, I could barely focus. My boss pulled me aside. You look exhausted. Is everything okay at home? I forced a smile. Everything's fine. But inside, I was falling apart. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and the forged contract spread in front of me. I compared it to my driver's license, my work documents. The differences in the signature were obvious. I started making copies, highlighting every inconsistency. If my family wanted to play games, I'd be ready. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. Avery, stop this nonsense. We already promised we'd pay you back. You're making everyone uncomfortable. Be grateful your sister is getting married. Grateful? For being robbed? My hands shook as I typed back. 30 days. Not. A day more. This time I didn't feel guilt. I felt resolve. Part 5. The fiancé finds out. A few days later, I ran into Ryan, Kendra's fiancé, at the grocery store. He looked surprised to see me, but I took the chance. Ryan, I said sharply, we need to talk about the venue. He frowned. The venue. What about it? I pulled the folded bill out of my purse and handed it to him. His eyes scanned the numbers, and his face drained of color. $10,000. On your card? He shook his head in disbelief. Kendra told me her parents were paying for it. I laughed bitterly. Well, they didn't. They used my credit without asking. And if this doesn't get paid, it's my credit score that tanks, not theirs. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck, looking torn. I had no idea. She told me everything was handled. I don't even... Avery, I can't afford this. My jaw tightened. Then you'd better figure out how to talk to your fiancé, because I'm not footing the bill. 30 days or it all goes to fraud investigation. And trust me, once that happens, her dream venue will vanish faster than you can say wedding cake. He nodded slowly, still pale. I'll talk to her. That night, Kendra blew up my phone with furious texts. How dare you ambush Ryan? Like that. You're jealous because someone finally cares about me for once. You're pathetic, Avery. I stared at the screen, then typed one response. Tell him the truth, or I will. For once, she didn't reply. Part 6. The Blame Game. 1 week later, another envelope showed up in my mailbox. This one stamped, Final Notice, Payment Due. The venue wasn't playing around. If the balance wasn't cleared within 2 weeks, the account would be sent to collections. I drove straight to my parents' house, bill in hand. Mom was in the kitchen, Dad watching TV, and Kendra lounging on the couch scrolling through Instagram like she didn't have a care in the world. I dropped the notice on the coffee table. Read it. 2 weeks left. Pay it, or I report the fraud. Kendra didn't even look up. Why are you being so selfish? You know you can afford it. This is my wedding we're talking about. I felt my blood boil. Selfish? You forged my signature. You ruined my credit. And you expect me to roll over because you want a party? Mom jumped in, her voice sharp. Don't talk to your sister that way. We've always done everything we could for you. Can't you do this one thing for her? I laughed bitterly. Everything for me? Name one time. Every time it's Kendra's recital, Kendra's birthday, Kendra's new car, and now Kendra's $10,000 venue. On my name. Dad muttered without, looking at me. You're overreacting. It's just money. That broke something inside me. It's not just money. It's respect. And you've never given me any. I grabbed the bill and turned to leave, but Kendra shouted after me. If this wedding falls apart, it's your fault, Avery. Everyone will know you ruined it. I spun around, my voice like ice. If this wedding falls apart, it's because you built it on lies, not me. For once, Kendra's smirk faltered. Part 7. Drawing the line. The next morning, I gathered every piece of evidence I had. Copies of my real signature, side by side with the forged one. Emails from the venue confirming the contract. Even screenshots of Kendra's social media posts bragging about her dream venue. Then I booked a meeting with a lawyer. She looked through the paperwork carefully before leaning back in her chair. This is clear-cut forgery. If you file a police report, your parents and your sister could face criminal charges. We can also have the venue void the contract. Hearing it laid out in such plain terms made my stomach twist. I never imagined I'd be in a position where I might have to drag my own family into court. But I also knew, if I didn't take a stand now, they'd never stop. That evening, I called a family meeting. Mom's lips were pressed tight, Dad looked grumpy, and Kendra had her arms crossed like a sulky teenager. I laid the folder of evidence on the table. Here's the reality. This is fraud. I can go to the police tomorrow. Or you three come up with a plan to pay back every cent within the next 2 weeks. Your choice. Kendra scoffed. You wouldn't actually call the cops. On your own family. I met her glare without flinching. Try me. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then, Dad finally spoke, his voice low. How much time do we have? 2 weeks, I said flatly. Not a day more. Mom's eyes welled with tears, but for once I felt nothing. No guilt, no obligation, just clarity. This wasn't about a wedding venue anymore. It was about finally drawing the line. Part 8. Desperate Measures. For the first time in years, I saw panic in Kendra's eyes. Her perfect little bubble had popped. Within days, the scrambling began. Kendra hauled garbage bags of clothes, purses, and jewelry to a consignment shop. I watched her argue with the clerk, furious when they offered her only a fraction of what she'd paid. In the end, she walked out with a check for less than $3,000. Her luxury life reduced to pennies on the dollar. Daddy. Signed up for overtime at the warehouse. The same man who used to mock me for working too much now limped home late at night, his hands raw from hauling crates. For once, I didn't feel sorry for him. And Mom, she quietly took off her wedding ring, slipped Grandma's pearl necklace into a box, and carried them to a pawn shop. The look on her face as she handed them over was one of defeat. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was hollow. This wasn't the victory I wanted. Meanwhile, the venue kept calling. Balance. Still due. Final deadline approaching. One night, Jessica, my best friend from work, came over with takeout. As I vented, she shook her head. They're learning the hard way. For once, you're not cleaning up their mess. They are. Her words hit me harder than she realized. For years, I had been the fixer, the responsible one, the safety net. But this time, I had forced them to face consequences. By the end of the first week, they'd scraped together just under $7,000. Still short. Still desperate. And the deadline loomed like a guillotine. Part 9. Paid in full, but not in trust. 2 days before the deadline, we were still short by more than $3,000. Mom sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands. Dad flipped through unpaid overtime slips. Kendra stared at her phone, scrolling bridal forums like none of this was happening. The tension was thick until the doorbell rang. Uncle Harvey stepped in, checkbook in hand. "I heard what's going on," he said, glaring at my parents. "This girl shouldn't be dragged through the mud because you can't say no to Kendra." He scribbled a number on the check, ripped it out, and slid it across the table. $3,500, but this is the last time. Pay that venue and close this mess. Mom burst into tears. Dad muttered a thank you. Kendra sulked, like her party had been ruined because she couldn't have the dream wedding she wanted. I picked up the check and tucked it into the envelope with the rest of the payments. The next morning, I marched back into the venue office, handed the manager the cashier's check, and signed the last line of paperwork. "All square," she said, giving me a tight smile. As I walked out, the Colorado sun hit my face. Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. Instead, felt the bitter sting of betrayal all over again. My family had paid the bill, yes, but they hadn't earned back my trust. That night at dinner, Dad tried to make small talk. Mom offered me extra potatoes. Kendra mumbled something about saving up to pay me back someday. I set down my fork. "No, you will pay me back. Every cent. And we're putting it in writing." Their faces froze. I pulled a contract from my bag, drafted by my lawyer, Rachel. Payment schedule, interest, signatures required. "This isn't about money anymore." I said, "This is about boundaries and respect." Part 10. Every cent repaid. The living room was silent, except for the faint tick of the old wall clock. My parents exchanged nervous glances, and Kendra's face flushed red. "You actually made a contract?" Mom whispered, her voice shaking. "Yes," I said firmly, sliding the papers across the table. "You all thought you could use my name, my credit, and I'd just roll over. Those days are gone. You're going to repay every cent, and this time, your promises won't be enough. Your signatures will." Dad picked up the pen first. His hand trembled as he signed, but for once he didn't argue. Mom followed, tears spilling silently onto the page. Kendra was last. She hesitated, glaring at me with a mix of anger and humiliation. "This is so petty," she hissed. "No," I replied calmly. "This is accountability." With a dramatic sigh, she scrawled her name. It was done. From that day forward, monthly, payments started arriving. Some were small, just a few $100s at a time, but they were consistent. Dad worked overtime. Mom sold off more of her jewelry. Even Kendra, stripped of her princess lifestyle, picked up part-time shifts at a retail store. And me, I didn't gloat. I didn't forgive overnight either. But I finally felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. One evening, Uncle Harvey dropped by. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You did the right thing. Sometimes the only way people learn is when it costs them." I smiled faintly. He was right. Months later, when the last payment cleared, I sat alone at my kitchen table and looked at the receipt. $10,237. Paid in full. But what I really held in my hands was something far more valuable. Proof that my boundaries mattered, that my respect couldn't be stolen, and that sometimes family only learns when you make them repay every cent.